Hi, Mystery Recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a fantasy horror movie called Horns. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The movie starts with a flashback scene where a guy named Ig is spending some intimate time with his girlfriend Marin in a forest. The scene then shifts to present day as Ig wakes up groggy on the floor of his room. The two were a loving couple and had been together since they were teenagers. However, after Marin lost her life in a brutal murder, her boyfriend became the prime suspect. Although the court could not find sufficient evidence to charge him with murder, Ig is hated by everyone in his town. Numerous reporters also regularly try to intimidate him into telling his side of the story, as his house is always under siege. The young man often runs away to his parents' house in search of a little peace. However, when he gets there, he also has to deal with the judgment of his family. Despite helping him get out of prison, his mother and father also believe that Ig is the perpetrator of the crime. His older brother, Terry, though, promises to be by his side no matter what happens. The only other person who believes in Ig's innocence is his best friend Lee, who also happens to be a lawyer. It was Lee who helped him get out of jail by defending his case after he was arrested for murder. However, when the two friends meet up, Lee reveals that the forensics laboratory where Marin's body was taken has just been set on fire, and all the blood samples have been destroyed. On top of that, the police have obtained a news statement from an anonymous witness who claims to have seen Ig dragging his girlfriend into a car on the night of the murder. That evening, Marin's father Dale and some of her acquaintances go to the treehouse where she was found dead to pay their respects. Coincidentally, Ig is also hiding inside the treehouse and has been drinking heavily for the past couple of hours. He knows he's not welcome there, as Dale also holds him responsible for his daughter's death. Later, when everyone leaves, Ig begins to destroy Marin's memorial and even urinates on it. Suddenly, one of his longtime friends, Galena, appears and tries to stop him from getting into further trouble, but one thing leads to another, and they end up making love. The next morning when Ig wakes up, he notices that the horns are starting to grow on his forehead. This scares him shitless, and he immediately asks Galena if she can see them too. However, instead of answering the question, she begins to confess her darkest thoughts while devouring a box of donuts. A confused Ig then goes to a doctor for help and sits down at the reception desk to fill out the admission form. Meanwhile, a bratty child starts screaming and scattering all her toys around the waiting room. Desperate at not being able to control her daughter, the woman sitting next to Ig reveals that her real desire is to leave that spoiled little girl right here and walk away. This once again freaks out our hero. Why is everyone acting like Professor Lockhart at the end of Chamber of Secrets? And he silently leaves from there. Later, when he hears the nurse say that she is being betrayed by her boyfriend, Ig finally realizes that everyone is revealing their secrets to him. Inside the doctor's office, he is sedated and begins to dream about the time when he first met Marin. It was in a church, and the two exchanged a few glances during service. Before leaving, he found a broken necklace that Marin had forgotten in the pew. Ig's dream then shifts to the day when he and his friends were playing by the beach. One of his friends, Eric, challenged him to go down the ramp in a shopping trolley. Glenna pleads for him not to do so, though secretly she thinks to herself that she'll probably bang him in a treehouse someday if he does do it. But despite the pleas, he decides to accept the challenge and ends up falling into the sea and getting stuck. Seeing his friend in danger, Lee quickly jumped in and somehow managed to get him out. That afternoon, Lee fixed Marin's crucifix so that his friend could give it back to her in exchange for a firecracker. Ever since that day, the two began to grow closer and never parted again. During a conversation, Ig discovered that Marin's mother had died of cancer the previous year, and she had recently moved to this town with her father. As they grew closer, Ig decided to take Marin to a house in the middle of the forest, and it became their favorite spot. When Ig wakes up in the present, he discovers that his horns are still intact. This makes him really upset, so he decides to ask the local pastor, Father Mold, for help. But as soon as the old man sees the horns, he gets frightened and says that nothing can be done now. According to Father Mold, Ig is being punished by God. In the next scene, Ig goes to his best friend and shockingly learns that Lee cannot see his horns. He therefore comes to the conclusion that good people cannot see them. While visiting his parents' house, Ig approaches his mother and discovers terrible things about her. She says says that she is tired of listening to her son's problems and cannot stand the sight of him any longer. This devastates Ig, and he proceeds to leave, but bumps into his father along the way. Dad then reveals that he hates his son for what he did to Marin, because the girl was the best part of Ig's life. He also admits that he set the forensics lab on fire because he feels duty-bound to protect his son. Upon hearing all of this, an emotionally wrecked Ig decides to take matters into his own hands. He now wants to use his powers to find out who murdered his girlfriend. Ig immediately gets into his car and drives to the bar in hopes of finding some answers. However, as usual, he is followed by countless reporters. Fed up with the constant harassment, Ig comes up with an idea. He suggests that the journalists battle each other, and the winner will get to do an exclusive interview with him. The plan surprisingly works, and chaos ensues, allowing Ig to enter the bar. Without wasting any time, he then uses his powers to force everyone to reveal whatever information they know about the night Marin died. Ig gets a lot of accounts from different customers, but none of them seem to be of any use to him. Just as he is about to leave, an old man reveals that a waitress saw him and Marin on that fateful night. She was the one who reported to the police about seeing Ig dragging Marin's lifeless body in his car. Following this, Ig gets back to his car and starts thinking about the day when he was going to propose to the love of his life. Only Lee and Terry knew about the surprise, and they were supposed to show up at the bar to celebrate. However, when the couple met, Marin revealed that she was moving to Los Angeles and no longer wanted to continue their relationship. This eventually led to an argument, as Ig believed that she was in love with someone else. When the matter escalated, Marin simply got up and left. Shortly after, Terry showed up at the bar thinking the proposal had been successful. However, a distraught Ig completely ignored him and left without any explanation. He then got into his car and drove around aimlessly until he found a quiet place to fall asleep. The next morning, Ig was awakened by two police officers who inquired when was the last time he saw Marin. This sent him into panic mode, and he immediately realized that something bad happened to her. Feeling guilty about fighting with her last night, Ig got emotional and said that it was all his fault. Unfortunately, the cops took it as self-admission of the crime, and from that point onwards, Ig became the prime suspect in Marin's murder. Back in the present, Ig confronts the waitress who had reported him as the suspect. He asks why she lied to the police about seeing him drag Marin into the car. In response, she smirks arrogantly and says she just wanted to be famous and appear on TV. An enraged Ig tries to question her more, but she hastily departs from there. After discovering the truth, Ig goes to the restaurant where his brother works as a musician. He reveals that he has found out about the anonymous witness and now wants his brother to go to the police station to give a statement. However, Terry responds by dropping a major bombshell. He admits that he had given Marin a lift home on that fateful night. Upon hearing this, Ig is filled with rage, and he attacks his brother aggressively. Terry claims that he offered to take the young woman home, but on the way, she decided to get out of the car. He tried to call her back, but she said she needed to go to the treehouse. As Terry was drunk and tired, he simply decided to wait for her and ended up falling asleep. The next morning, when he woke up, he found a blood-stained stone on the driver's seat. This freaked him out, and he immediately rushed into the woods to look for Marin, only to find her lifeless body near a tree. Terry was devastated by the sight, but he was more worried that he would be tried as the suspect. Therefore, he got rid of all the evidence that could link him to the crime. He also decided not to tell anyone about what happened on that fateful day. In the present, Ig realizes that his brother knew vital information that could have helped him clear his name. In a fit of rage, he starts beating Terry, but the cops soon arrive and arrest him for creating a scene. The next morning, Lee manages to bail him out, and the two friends engage in conversation, but in the midst of it, Ig notices him wearing Marin's crucifix. This suddenly makes him realize that his best friend was the guy she was in love with, and that's why they broke up. That night, Ig goes to an abandoned building and tries his best to remove those bizarre horns by banging his head on a concrete wall, but soon enough, he realizes that the place is infested with snakes, and they are all crawling towards him. He immediately grabs a piece of wood to defend himself, but realizes that the snakes do not want to hurt him. Instead, one of the reptiles climbs onto him and positions itself around his neck like a pet. The snake has him confused for Megan the Stallion. At this moment, Ig is seized by an even stronger desire for revenge against all of those who have wronged him. He decides to teach them all a lesson, starting with the waitress. Later, as she is preparing to go home after her shift ends, Ig sneaks up behind her car. He then commands one of his snakes to bite her face, destroying the very thing she was obsessed with, her beauty. Next, he drives to his brother's house and catches him using all kinds of illicit substances substances. Ig uses his powers to force him to ingest all the substances at once. His aim is not to eliminate Terry, but to make him fall into a coma and make him suffer everything that Marin went through. Minutes later, Terry has frightening hallucinations, and he goes into a state of complete shock. After this, Ig arranges a meeting with Lee, and immediately pulls off Marin's necklace from his neck. Surprisingly, the latter is now able to see the horns, and it turns out the necklace was preventing him from doing so. Now that Lee is exposed to the magic, he ends up revealing that it was him who killed Marin. Following this, we are shown a montage of flashbacks. It is revealed that Lee was also in love with Marin, and was deeply jealous of Ig throughout their childhood. On the night that Marin broke up with Ig, Lee followed her into the woods. He wrongfully thought that she had been sending him signals, and that she broke up with Ig to be with him. When Marin insisted that she loved Ig more than anyone in the world, Lee forced himself on her in a jealous rage and killed her with a rock. He then stole her necklace and planted the bloody rock in Terry's car. Back in the present, a fight breaks out between the two men, and Lee eventually overpowers Ig after beating him up badly. He puts him in his car and lights it on fire. He then returns to the city, claiming that Ig confessed to the crime and committed the unthinkable. Unbeknownst to him, the horns save Ig from the fire. Though he is horrifically burned and disfigured, he drags himself to Marin's house and finally manages to convince her father that he is innocent. After this, he puts the locket around his neck, as it is the only memory he has of his beloved. As soon as Ig does so, his body is miraculously restored, and the horns disappear. Marin's dad then hands him the key to her lockbox, which he quickly opens. Inside it, Ig finds a note from Marin, revealing that she knew he was going to propose. He tearfully reads on as the letter explains that she was dying of cancer, and did not want him to suffer, so she pushed him away under the pretense of loving someone else. Following this, Ig goes to visit his brother, who is recovering at the hospital. He reveals that it was his best friend Lee behind all of this. Terry is shocked by the information, as he always thought Lee was a good guy. He offers to help his brother get revenge, but Ig knows Terry isn't in the condition to move, so he decides to go alone. He soon arrives at Lee's house, but realizes that the latter has no recollection of the earlier fight between them. Thus, he invites Lee to take a walk in the forest, and leads him to the spot where Marin was killed. Shortly after, Terry also shows up with a police officer, and they corner Lee to make a confession. However, when everyone is distracted, the cunning guy snatches the officer's gun and kills him, while also injuring Terry. At this critical moment, Ig tears off Marin's necklace, causing him to sprout a pair of wings and burst into flames. He eventually transforms into a demonic monster with big horns and a flaming body. A terrified Lee shoots him several times at point-blank range, but Ig is still standing. In his wounded state, he approaches his ex-best friend and stabs him with his horns. He then telepathically forces a snake down Lee's throat, killing him for good. In the final scene, Ig succumbs to his injuries and drops to the floor. As Terry cries in despair, Ig's smoldering corpse turns to hardened ash, and he appears to be reunited with Marin in the afterlife.